can go to this assessment resources class, and if you aren't already enrolled in it, you can self-enroll, and all of the information for today is up in this site. So if you go to assessment day, and then look at all this stuff we've got. So if you go to today's assessment day, you'll see all the PowerPoints for all the presentations right here. So which one is this one that I'm doing? Right here.
Okay, I'm going to share your screen.
Okay. So if you want to, I mean, if you just want this for future reference, or I want to say one other thing too. Abby and I gave this presentation as part of the assessment kind of professional development this fall. So if you attended one of those sessions this fall, it's just going to be a repeat of what we did there. So you can probably, I could kick you out a little bit. I don't know.
You're on. I can see it on. Huh. You're right there, but I want to make sure you're sharing your screen. Well, if you want to start, I actually can't start until I do.
Yeah, you're right.
This is bizarre.
What's in that little pocket thing?
Yeah, I closed that.
So at the bottom, we have things like remembering. So say you ask a student to define something or remember facts or things like that. That's kind of a basic lower order thinking skill. I mean, how many times have you taken a test and you regurgitated everything that you memorized and then don't remember it at all? That's, sorry, Dana, but that's how I got through biology. But anyway, so that's like basic stuff, okay? And then the next level is the level of understanding. So can you take what you've memorized and maybe put it in your own words or recap something? So like, say you read a chapter in a book. Can you put, you know, summarize what happened in your own words? Something like that. Next level is applying. Can you actually take that information and apply it in a new way or apply it to something or interpret it? So for example, can you learned some, so for instance, I teach our teacher education courses, and we talk about different student teaching philosophies. And so can they actually apply that and see where, and they analyze, honestly, I have them go analyze all of you, and they analyze and say, okay, these teachers apply this kind of philosophy in their classroom. Analyzing, kind of comparing and contrasting, a little bit higher level of thinking, because you have to know all these lower levels to be able to compare and contrast something. You have to know how, remember facts and be able to put them in your own words and be able to apply them to situations to be able to compare and contrast two things. The next level is evaluating. Can you make a judgment and support your opinion or decision based on evidence? And then at the very top level is creating. And that's kind of like the big picture stuff. Can you take all this stuff that you know and you've learned and create your own kind of product? So when we're writing student learning outcomes, we kind of want to think about these levels of blooms. And it's interesting, when I did this workshop this fall, somebody, I think it was Jess, Beckus Foster, I think she came and she was actually looking at her student learning outcomes for like a 300 level course. And she's like, oh my gosh, these are terrible, because most of them were written down here at these levels, right? Like, and a lot of the verbs, students will be able to explain the concept of blah, 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 right? In a 300 level course, we don't want students down here at this level. We want them up here, right? Maybe 100 level courses, we want them more down on this level. But as they progress through their program, we want them to have higher level thinking skills, higher order thinking skills.
I just have a quick question.
Yep.
So many of our courses in LAS are gen ed courses. So what if you have a 100 level gen ed course and a 300 level gen ed course, and we've been told for years, just throw the gen ed SLOs in there. So are you suggesting that we also put additional SLOs on for those higher level courses?
I would, but myself, that would be my recommendation, only because, yes, it's counting for gen ed, and most of our gen ed is kind of down here because it is gen ed.
Yeah.
It's what basic level thing everybody has to take. But if you're teaching a 300 level gen ed, I would think you would add some stuff to it to make it worthy of a 300 level course.
And then the follow-up question is then, would we have to then revise the proposal and get those new SLOs approved by curriculum?
Yes. Alice says yes. I'm deferring all questions to her. Yeah. So in thinking about your courses, and we're going to save some time for that at the end, we're going to look at some courses and kind of think where these are in terms of Blooms. But Blooms is this great tool because it helps you with the verbs. So when you're writing those student learning outcomes, it kind of gives you verbs to start you off. So we'll come back to that in a second. But I just want to show you kind of one example of how you can take a kind of, maybe I'm going to show you something. There we go. All right. One example where you can kind of take one assignment and look at it at all sorts of different levels of blooms. So this is kind of an iconic picture, Woodstock, right? So we can ask questions about this picture in different ways to get at different levels of thinking. So down here at the bottom, at the remembering, simple questions. When was this picture taken? Where was this picture taken? Right? Not a whole lot of thought process that has to go into that, right? It's kind of just basic information. We move up a little to understanding. What is happening in this picture? How do these people appear to you? You've got to interpret it a little bit. Applying. How would you describe the photograph to others? What caption would you write for this photograph, say in a newspaper? Again, higher order thinking skills as we move up. Analyzing. Why are these people here and not at work? What do you know about their lives based on this photo? Okay, even further up, evaluate. What is the significance of this photo for the time and period depicted? Compare this photo with one or two current photos of a couple at the same age. How are their lives similar? How are their lives different? And then at the highest level, creating, what might these people say about this event in a newspaper interview? What might they say about the impact of this event on their future? So you see, you can look at some kind of assignments that you have and think about how you're asking the questions about them to get at different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so let's actually start thinking about how we actually write these learning outcomes and how we can use Bloom's to help us do that. So some kind of do's and don'ts of writing learning outcomes. First of all, definitely use some action verbs from Bloom's taxonomy, okay? So honestly, that's the first thing I do when I start writing learning outcomes. I just had to I wrote a course proposal last semester, and I brought out my little triangle here, and I started thinking about what I wanted them to do, and I started picking verbs from there. Do make sure that your outcome supports the unit's missions and goals. So if you're writing learning outcomes for a course, you want to kind of fit those learning outcomes from your course into the program learning outcomes, right? Ideally, everything should kind of tie together, right? Course learning outcomes should feed to program learning outcomes, should feed to institutional learning outcomes. There's always a few strays along the way, you know, but ideally you want a coherent picture where everything fits together. And do focus on terminal behavior, what students should be able to do at the end of whatever you're writing the learning outcome for. So there's kind of, you know, we talk a lot about course learning outcomes. We talk about program learning outcomes, right? And what students should be able to do at the end of the program. But there are even things like unit learning outcomes, right? I teach a unit on linear equations. There's a unit learning outcome for that. There's also a a lesson learning outcome, right? At the end of this day's lesson, I want students to be able to do blah, 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 blah. So you can think about these learning outcomes at all different levels, but they should all kind of build together. But think about when you're wording them, what you want students to be able to do when you're at the end of that thing. Some other do's and don'ts. Do make sure that the outcome can actually be measured. I know I'm assuming on curriculum you've seen along the way, as we've been revamping some of our learning outcomes, we've seen ones that couldn't be measured. Like students will understand the American criminal justice system. How do you measure understanding? Right? What are, you know, like you can't see inside students' brains to see that they actually understand. They've got to do something to show that they understand it. So what are they going to do? They're going to describe the history of the American criminal justice system. Students will become familiar with conducting experiments. Like, who cares if you're familiar with conducting? You got to be able to do an experiment, right? Students will learn presentation skills. Again, it's great that they learned them, but they've got to be able to do it. So making it measurable, students will prepare well-designed presentations using a variety of presentation techniques. One kind of don't is try not to be too wordy. This one's a little wordy. Students will be able to apply one of the many theories of social psychology and apply those theories to a number of real-world situations. Really, what's that getting at? Students can apply theories of social psychology to real-world situations. So try to be as concise as possible. Again, it takes practice a little bit. Don't include multiple outcomes in one outcome. And this is actually one that I had on my One Education course. Identify and interpret the basic components of educational research. And then I got looking at, I'd written it, and then I got looking, and it was on my course syllabus for a couple semesters. And then actually when you went back and looked at it again, I'm like, well, that's stupid. Because if they identify things, that's kind of that one of, they've got to be able to identify it in order to interpret it. So why have, right, identifies down at a lower level of Bloom's, interprets up at an upper level. So if I just say that they have to interpret, then that means that they've already identified. Make sense? Don't be too vague. Students will learn the programming language Python. Like, again, we'll learn what does that mean. So how are you going to demonstrate that they can do that and actually measure it? So students will use a programming language, Python, to complete a data mining analysis. I don't even know what that means. But, all right, so here you go. So here's a couple learning outcomes. Take a look at them. Tell me if they're good. Let me know. If not, how can they improve? So just kind of talk amongst yourselves for a second, and then we'll pick some volunteers too.
Second one is.
Oh, evaluation. How do you?
Oh, no, inadequate. I think we should.
About the money, man.
Yeah.
And taking notes.
The importance of the American checks.
I think it might be.
Well,
Describing.
I think I might say students will describe system checks and balances.
So it's that first one.
But I also like that occurs in the mind. You want them to do something. You have to go explain, describe. I think not even well-designed things, students. Bodies. Well-designed, exquisite.
Somebody else is well designed. That's just way over here. Oh, right. Yeah.
Well, they are.
Oh, I don't. There you go.
We did that. Just keep, yeah, don't go that way.
What do you think about the first one? Good? A thumbs up? Thumbs down? Thumbs down? All right, what do you think? Anybody want to say anything? Go ahead,
It's
Chris.
not measurable.
It's not measurable. How come?
Students will learn to develop a well-designed argument. What does that look like? You have to be able to measure something specific that indicates that. So that doesn't get us to where we need to go.
How would you fix it?
Sorry,
put you on the spot.
I'm thinking maybe students will outline a well-developed argument.
Okay, there you go. Ward, what do
I
you
was
think?
just going to take out the phrase learn to. Students will develop.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go. Easy. We had, when I did this session in the fall, we had a huge discussion about, well, what does well-designed mean? What do you
Depends on your
think?
industry.
Go ahead.
It depends on the industry you're in or what the purpose of that argument is. So it's beyond just, oh, a good argument, because I can give you a good argument, but I might not give you a good argument at something based in chemistry as I will in business.
Right.
So it's going to depend on what the industry is.
And how do students know what well-defined means? Or well-designed, whoops.
So it might be included in the curriculum. So I will present an argument using the components identified as needed for a well-designed argument.
Right, probably you've taught them what a well-designed argument is, and maybe there's a rubric that says, this is what I mean by a well-designed, and it's kind of like what Dr. Mecca was saying a little bit, like, we've got to tell them a little bit about what the expectations are, what we mean, what we mean by well-designed. How about this second one? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Down? How come?
How do you measure no?
Yeah, how do you measure will know that students actually know something? And how do you measure that it's important? Yeah, exactly. How would you fix it? Go ahead,
You
Mary.
change no, simply, you get rid of why.
Okay.
Say students will describe the system of checks and balances. And then the phrase is important is the focus of the discussion. In other words, once they've made this description, then the class should be prepared to discuss how it works and if it works.
Okay, and then how would you write a learning outcome that, because if you just said students will describe this, right, that's kind of a lower level Bloom thing. How could you beef up that learning outcome a little bit to get at a higher level of Bloom?
Describe might be good for the 100 level.
Yeah, exactly. How would you do it at a 300 level? Sorry, Jeff, Simon, either one.
Students will defend why the system is important.
Okay.
Students will apply the system of checks and balances to a modern example.
Perfect. Yeah.
Students will analyze the importance of the system of checks and balances.
Perfect.
I'm thinking have two learning objectives, one lower level, one higher level.
And again, but think about this. If it's a course learning outcome, right, we want to know what students are going to be doing at the end of a course, right? So maybe at the end of, your first lesson, we want them to be able to define or describe it, but maybe at the end of the course, we want them to analyze or apply or, something like that. So if we're writing course learning outcomes, we want to think what we want them to be able to do at the end of the course. So we probably want to get at that higher level of Blooms. Make sense? Okay. All right. So now you're going to, okay, let me just show you. This is kind of a framework for how you can actually write a learning outcome. So again, by the end of whatever, your course, by the end of your program, by the end of your lesson, by the end of this unit, whatever you're doing, who do you want to be able to, in most cases for us as students, unless maybe you're working with, maybe you're in human resources and you're doing a training program. You could still write a learning outcome, but your students are faculty and staff, right? So who do you want faculty and staff will be able to, like, this level of effectiveness? That kind of goes back to that well-designed argument thing in that last learning outcome that we were talking about. And then what do you want them to be able to do? And using those verbs from Bloom's taxonomy. Okay? So this is kind of some examples. After completing this course, participants will be able to successfully conduct a needs analysis. Again, this is the degree, successfully, and successfully might mean different things to different areas. But we've got to somehow communicate that to people, whoever our people are, our audience is, to know, so that they know what successfully means as well. After completing this module, students will be able to use technology to effectively analyze information.
So you don't need to specify what is successful, what would.
Not in a learning outcome.
Not in the learning outcome, but somewhere in the course or the module or whatever, you have to define it somehow.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead,
I
Alice.
think you could put it in the learning outcome if it's written concisely. Like I like to do like a by statement. So like I might have after that a needs analysis, comma, by, or or using,
how you're doing it. Yeah.
Right. So you could concisely put it in your SLL.
So you could add an extra piece to this at the end. Like I'm trying to think of one I have written for my education course. I'm trying to think how to, like, by the end of this course, students will apply our, it's something about, I gotta think, never mind, I'm not doing it well. Go ahead, Alice, go ahead.
So I have one I just did for medical Spanish class, and I said, like, it's a gen ed course, so I use the crappy SUNY gen ed language because I have to, but then I put by, so it's like, we'll demonstrate fluency at a blah, blah, blah in foreign language by, and then I put completing interactions, you know, in the topic of, you know, I don't know, whatever it was, like, you know, medical, I can't remember exactly, not being very
Right.
helpful,
We're both very good.
right, but it was like that, like.
So you can add more if you want, but you know what I mean? But it doesn't have to be in there. Okay. All right. So, but again, somewhere, if you're teaching a course or somewhere, if you're doing something, the participants need to know what successfully or effectively or whatever that means.
Right, it seems very sort of vague.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Okay, so here's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to give you the topic, and and you're going to write learning outcome, a student learning outcome that addresses each level of Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, and the topic is this. So all of you in all of your areas have to deal. You want students to behave professionally. There's some kind of measure or some kind of standard for professional behavior in your area. So write learning outcomes for professional development in your area. It could include things like resume writing, interview skills, hard and soft skills, professional dress, professional etiquette, professional email, any of those kind of topics. Professional, I don't even know. So try to write learning outcomes that have to do with, say, pretend you're teaching almost like a unit on professional development in one of your courses. Make sense?
Okay.
I know, it's a little tougher for little ones. Pretend it's teacher ed. Pretend you're doing teacher ed.
Oh, I can do that.
You can do that one.
I can do that.
You can do
What is our?
Yeah, I think they work well in.
I don't think so. What are like one of the biggest weaknesses? It could be like, I just take it to show. I was reading this way. Pick up what? Say like, you know, if you're gonna do like
I just want to.
basics about
Yeah, well, you can, yeah. I should have brought my case. I have like errors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I'm writing. Yeah, that's really. I have to.
Oh, yeah.
Where am I on?
That would have been good. Accreditation, so we could prepare them. Tell them yes, they can do the shots, hours. Yeah, accreditation, yeah, continuation. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, fill in the blanks, just like Madeline.
No, not this way. Yeah, I would say that. So you have to describe the students.
Graduating students will be
Successfully explaining why. I would say successfully.
right.
Yeah, I would just say we'll be prepared, maybe to. I used to, yeah. Yes. Well, we didn't tell us. Yeah, so.
Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah. So I would just say.
Well, I would well, all right, there we go. We got it.
Well, no, now we gotta come up with our places.
Build up on chemistry.
Yeah, it's really hard to read, aren't they? Let me switch back to that for a minute.
Yeah, right.
I would say basic electrical theory, understanding, using to remember. Oh yeah. So remembering, I would say. Oh, maybe I would say basic understanding. Just you remember. You remember. So understanding, describe, name, identify. So I'll be able to identify electrical components. System components, electrical system components. How about well, then applying
Dave says he hit with that application.
I always think of it.
So applying using what our being able to use electrical, well, I would use metering and analyze. So I would say being able to do listed under understanding calculations.
We don't stick here. We start.
So what would you do in analyzing?
calculations of it. Calculations. Analyzing could be that could be.
They're not
So it'd be like, looking at systems and evaluating. Yeah, evaluating.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Oh, right, that was the big thing, you wanted to sleep. On the night tonight, and you're getting that water bottle.
So, does anybody want to share some of the learning outcomes that they wrote? Can't wait to. Okay. How about remembering? What do we got? All right, wait, before I do that though, did anybody find certain ones more difficult to write than others? Which ones did you find difficult to write?
Analyzing and evaluating.
That means, oh yeah, analyzing, evaluating.
Yep.
Yeah, I always have trouble with applying and analyzing, those two in there. I don't know why. It's kind of like, you know, when you write rubrics and you're really good at the, you know, meeting and you're really good at the bad stuff, but I can never describe the stuff in the middle. It's the same thing. Or at least for me anyway. Okay, but what do we have for remembering? Anybody want to share one that you wrote for remembering? Go ahead.
The student will state, excuse me, student will state 5 professional nursing expectations.
Okay, so is that at the end of the course, at the end of the unit, at the end of the?
At the end.
At the end of the course, students will be able to, say it again, sorry.
We'll be able to state 5 professional nursing expectations.
Exactly, so basic level, right? They need to know those expectations. They're not applying them, they're not doing anything with them, they just need to know what they are. Anybody else have one?
Oh, come on.
Go ahead, Ward.
Okay, I'll go with the teacher as one here. After completing this unit, students will be able to successfully list the standards of professional dress in a K-12 classroom.
There you go, there you go. So just, you know, they should know what they are, basic level. Okay, how about understanding? Oh, teachers, what's wrong with you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. We do ours for archaeology. Archaeologists will be able to compare and contrast an archaeological unit in an SC.
Compare and contrast under evaluation.
Yeah.
It's under both.
Yeah,
It's both.
I tend to think of it as a little bit higher because to be able to compare and contrast, like, and I know it's sometimes you look at some of those lists and it shows up in multiple places, and I think it depends on what you're doing with the compare and contrast. You know what I mean? If you're comparing and contrasting, like, I'm trying to think, your elementary school kids, and they draw those little Venn diagrams where they have and it's something like, you know, mammals and, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of compare and contrast, yeah, is probably at that level.
Yeah.
But
That's what
probably,
this is.
that's what that is, okay.
Or do you dig a square hole?
That's fine then I
Yeah,
would agree
that's
with you. Then I would agree with you. Because you just kind of, but do you see where compare and contrast could also be up here?
Can go into places.
Exactly. So, anybody have another one for understanding? Go ahead, Kirby.
Students will be able to understand how sports leads to democratization.
Okay, but probably again that will understand is hard to measure, right? Because will understand, like, how do you really tell it? What are students going to be able to do so that you know that they understand it? So, like, I'm trying to find here. Maybe students will be able to explain why. What you said at the end, students will be able to describe, discuss. Any of those things might be a better verb to use in that situation to still get an understanding without the word understand. That's really awesome that you have to do it that way. Okay. Applying. Go ahead, Ward.
After completing your unit, students will be able to professionally dress in a K-12 course.
There you go. You actually go do it. You actually take everything that you learned and actually dress appropriately. What else? Go ahead.
We did professional email, and for our apply, it was students will outline the pertinent parts of a professional.
Okay. Yep. So taking all those things that they've learned and applying it to a situation. How about analyzing? Whoops, why did I push that? Analyzing.
Actually,
okay, go ahead.
I'm thinking what you described was not applying. I'm thinking applying would be something like students will write a professional.
Okay, that would work, right? Because applying.
What you said is analyzing.
Oh, sorry, I was in.
To identify what those parts were so that later on you can.
That's like remembering, or maybe understanding.
And sometimes these questions help. So the remembering level is, can the students recall or remember information? Understanding, can the student explain ideas or concepts? Applying is, can the student use the information in a new way?
So maybe they're not actually in an email, maybe they are actually in a memo, or maybe they're in a report, and they identify what those parts are.
I don't think that's applying. That is remembering or understanding.
I think it's got to be a little bit higher than remembering, probably.
Because we had for remember to list the parts.
Yep.
So then you took that list of parts up to and applied them.
And again, some of these are fuzzy.
Right.
Some of them are fuzzy, especially for me. Fuzzy is between applying and analyzing. That's me, and you know what I mean. This I can do. This I can do. This I can do. But in this middle part is a little bit fuzzy. Okay, but again, you're trying to get at what students can do and try to get them to think a little bit at higher order.
Depending on
Does that help?
Right. Here's your.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Ours there.
Go ahead, Miriam.
I'd like my students to be able to look at a spider and say, "Ooh, I know that's a spider because it has 8 legs and 2 body regions and no antennae. And I know it's a male because his front feelers are modified for mating." I do not want them to say, "A spider, kill it."
Okay, so what do we have for analyzing? What do we have for analyzing?
This is what I struggle with.
Do people struggle with analyzing? What'd you write, Chris? Oh, sorry,
This may be poor, which is why I'm bringing it up so I can get some feedback. And it can be written better, but the idea is students will identify the effects of various common scientifically identified biases in various domains. Or more simply, students will identify the effects of biases in various domains: educational policy, media, blah, blah, blah.
That's pretty broad.
Being able to say, you know what, I think this bias is being displayed here, and here's the effect that this is likely to have on readers or consumers or student-teacher relationships. So we might want to use a different verb.
Right,
That's
I think the verb, I think what you're getting at, probably, but the verb could be a little bit, because to me, identify is just like is maybe
sounds
almost at
like
the
it's
applying
low,
or a
right.
little bit lower because you could just
Students will,
spot it.
students will.
But
will
class,
dis-
yeah.
Students will describe, no, better
Nope.
than that. We did better. Verb.
Yeah, higher than that.
Help me out, guys. Students will anticipate.
Interpret.
Or anticipate.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Anticipate's hard to measure. Interpret's not bad.
Oh, they're writing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they're writing it or saying it, in other words, it's something you can see and measure, right?
Right.
What was the word again? I heard over here?
Interpret.
Interpret.
It has to be Skinnerian. You have to see it and measure it.
Exactly. What were you gonna say, Simon?
Oh, we've got one to share.
Awesome. Let's hear it.
Back of the room group here.
This
We're doing like professional presentations for students, so
Uh-huh.
students will be able to compare and contrast professional presentations.
Like of other people's students?
Yeah.
That almost might us actually even be up to evaluate.
We had for evaluating, we had like make suggestions for improvement.
Okay. What were you gonna say, Laura? I cut you.
That's okay. Archaeologists will be able to analyze, categorize artifacts and features, and then classify them.
Categorizing, right? So
And
then you're
class-
comparing and contrasting and classifying.
They're
Yep.
putting them in particular categories
So
and
you're
classifying them
distinguishing
according
between
to
parts.
time
Yep.
period. Yeah.
So in that one, that sounds a little bit double barrel, but if they do both,
Right, a little
they
bit.
meet it.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't want to do. Maybe you just want to do classify because they've got to be able to identify all those things in
Right.
order to be able to classify. Yeah. Any other comments? Evaluating. I think yours was good back there. There was Simon, Ben,
And
Jason. I forgot who else was sitting down there. Right? Can you say yours again, Simon? Did he leave or something? Oh, he's back there. What? The one for evaluating.
Students will be able to make suggestions for improving professional presentations.
Okay. So they're making a judgment, right? They're watching professional presentations and making a judgment and justifying that judgment. Other top ideas?
You say critique, a student will critique a professional email?
Yep. So again, making a judgment and justifying that judgment. How about creating? Go ahead, Lori.
Archaeologists will be able to reconstruct the lifeways of past civilizations based on the material recovered.
That sounds really, really hard to do. Yeah, right? And that's what those things should be, right?
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It is.
And that's what those things should be, right? And my students in teacher ed struggle because like I do an activity with them where I give them all sorts of different assignments and make them classify it. And so like one of the activities is make a diorama of the Civil War or something like that. And they think that's creating because they're making something. But I'm like, that doesn't take much thought. You roll some clay up and put it in a box, right? So that's just because you're making a thing doesn't necessarily mean it's creating. Those creating things are those really tough, difficult things that pull everything together. Go ahead.
I think one way to think about it is that it's almost like a capstone.
Yeah.
This is the
Yep.
top of the pyramid. This is the last thing. It's the culmination of the entire class.
Exactly. And you have to know all these other parts to be able to do it. Were you gonna say something?
Well, I was just gonna say, what we're doing now, would this be more application or would this go into creative?
Question. Probably a little bit of applying, right? But a little bit of analysis too, because we're looking at other people's and analyzing it and trying to fit it in the right category. Good question.
But not creative.
I guess you are but again, I think that's a small creating. You know what I mean? Because no, you know what I mean? Like maybe the creating is maybe what we're gonna do next, and let me tell you that where it's the big picture type thing, where you're let me show you. So all right, my next thing that I want you to think about, and we only have a few minutes, but is to actually look at your course.
Right.
Okay? And look at and this is kind of a chart to help you think about it. And look at your course, and first of all, analyze your course learning outcomes. What level do they fall at? Which level of Bloom's do they align with? And is that where I want them to be? Am I teaching a 300 level course and all my learning outcomes are here? Am I teaching a 100 level course and all my outcomes are here? That's probably not good, right? Then also, once you have that in place and like really look at your outcomes and are they well written, then think about what kind of activities and assignments that you're using to measure those. I'll give you an example. My daughter took a math class in high school last year, and all of her assignments, all of her homeworks were down here at this level. Remembering, understanding, very, 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 very basic. All of the tests were up here at analyze. Totally at analyze. They were complex questions that involved taking a whole lot of pieces of information and putting them together that hadn't really ever been practiced at these levels, you know? So to me, that was kind of a poor design. You're almost setting students up to be a failure. If you don't let them practice at the level at which they're going to be assessed, how are they going to be successful? So think about what you have, sorry, just second your, think about your assignments and your activities and what you do in class and how they all build together to get students to achieve at the level you wish for them to achieve.
How did you, as both a parent and a teacher, discuss this with Sylvia's teacher?
She didn't find it in the class, so I wasn't worried about it. I'll worry about it when my son gets there, because he won't be fine. But I was tutoring a lot of kids who were trying to be successful in that class, and it was difficult for them.
As a professional tutor, what do you say to a teacher who does not address the disparity between lower level teaching and higher level testing?
I didn't say anything to the teacher because I personally didn't say anything to teachers. I said something to parents about what to say to the teacher. So because it wasn't my kid that was experiencing it. So questions or some other comment? Go ahead.
So on this, you have the percent of time spent in class. Would it be appropriate also to add in out of class?
I think so too. Because think about this too, and like think about just kind of the value of your assignments. You know, sometimes we do give assignments, and after we really think about them, we're like, what was the point of that? You know, it didn't really fit in the whole big picture. Think about study skills and things that you might reinforce. For instance, you know, big projects and breaking it up into small pieces and getting feedback along the way, those kinds of things. I've had so many kids in math classes that I've actually had that you've had to teach them how to study for a math test. Mm-hmm. And to say, no, you don't just read your notes over, and when you take notes, you write down the problem too, not just the solution. You know, like things that you think are obvious, but you have to teach that. And if you really want to get them up to even this analyze stage, if they can't figure out anything to remember, they don't write down what the definitions are, how are they going to get to that level? So how can you incorporate things like that into your class to help them be successful?
I think one of the problems that I have anyway is the fact that what I teach is industry driven, okay? And sometimes the lower level courses will depend on the higher level learning, create, evaluate, analyze. There's no getting around it. So where
you're saying that you're teaching the lower level courses or the higher?
I'm teaching a 200 course, right, where they create things and they evaluate, and they have to because it's a basic course, but they have to create. Okay. But
you're saying that they haven't learned this stuff from the 100 level to be able to get to that higher level. Is that what you're saying?
No, they have learned the 100 level. What I'm saying is, on a 200 level course, though, you should be basically on the lower three, correct?
Well,
200 you're up.
You're up a little bit.
But on the upper parts,
it's going to be hard, right?
Yeah.
Right? So what kind of scaffolding can you incorporate in your class to help them get to that level? Right? It's kind of like one of those things that they aren't almost mature enough to get to that level intellectually or emotionally, I don't think myself, but you're right. So if you want them to get to that level, what how do you incorporate things in your class to get them to that level?
It's based on the industry, again, because the industry is always changing.
Yep. Oh, thanks.
I think you're probably talking about how to write student learning outcomes, right?
Right.
So I think the answer is you have to write the outcomes that are appropriate for your course.
Mhm.
You know, if they have to work at a higher level, then your student learning outcomes have to be at the higher level as well.
And I agree with that. The problem I'm saying is because the industry constantly changes, your outcome is
Are going to change constantly. You're going to become best friends with Alice and constantly take things to curriculum, is my guess.
Unless you write your outcomes in such a way that they can change with time.
Exactly.
That's all.
Right, so maybe,
Clever.
how about, and so maybe on your criteria is industry relevant or something like that. That's your criteria. You know, they're still going to do general things, but it's industry relevant things, and that way you wouldn't have to. So, oh, go ahead, Linda. Yeah, we got like 1 minute. Go ahead.
I think 100 level can get to create. It's just relative to what level they're at. Because I mean, if you think about it, middle school teachers are being asked to take them all the way up the Bloom's taxonomy. It's just, it all has to be relative.
It's a lesser level of creating.
Yeah, or it's appropriate for where they are. And if you did that same create, activity at a 300 level course, the quality, the depth of it would be far more. I mean, in a 100 level course, I have my students create a menu. I mean, that's the culmination of the semester. So, it's not going to be what they would do at a 300 at the end of the program. They would probably tweak that tremendously, but it's a starting point.
Yep.
So
I guess I was thinking more creating in terms of like program learning outcomes, but you're right. Yeah, course learning outcomes. Yep. So this is just kind of a chart to help you kind of think about your course and how you might improve it. So thank you very much for coming.